Did you know that there was a time not super long ago when buying a particular book of sheet music would be akin to making a drug deal on a street corner or in the back of some music shop somewhere? Many of you probably already know that I'm talking about the real book. This is essentially the Bible for all young jazz musicians. It is the single book that we all turn to when we're learning this music so that we can participate in jam sessions and play with other musicians. It contains so many of the tunes that we consider to be standard repertoire in the jazz world. But here's the thing. The real book, at least until about 2004, was illegal. And a lot of it was, and still is, just wrong. Here we go, ready? 5, 1.
I find myself out gazing at stars, hearing guitars like someone in
Wait a minute.
love.
Not only is that incredibly gorgeous, it's not what we are used to hearing or playing in jazz. Did you catch what just happened there?
At stars, hearing guitars
Right there.
like someone.
Right there. That's not what we have in the real book. That's not what I have spent my whole life playing this tune. Now, of course, in the book, this tune is written in E flat, but Ella is singing it in G. So just so that we can compare with the recording, I'll go ahead and play this tune in G, but I'm gonna use the changes that are written in the real book. That's a little different. I mean, despite the fact that I completely screwed up the melody. Now let's play that again, but in the real book version, which we find in E flat. So there's something really interesting going on about Ella's version, which is actually much, much closer to the version that Jimmy Van Heusen originally wrote. Briefly, just looking at the history of Like Someone in Love, the tune, it was written in 1944 by Jimmy Van Heusen and Johnny Burke, and it was actually written for a film called The Belle of Yukon. It was sung by Dinah Shore. And then a year later, in 1945, Bing Crosby did a recording of the tune that reached number 15 on the charts and was a big hit for him. So one can only assume that those original versions by Dinah Shore and Bing Crosby are probably much closer to what Jimmy Van Heusen originally wrote in terms of the harmony. Why don't we consult the actual original source itself? This is Dinah Shore in 1944 singing Like Someone in Love from the film The Belle of Yukon. Check this out. Well, we haven't even heard Dinah Shore sing yet, and we already have our answer. So it's official. The real book is wrong, meaning it is not what Jimmy Van Heusen actually wrote. What do we find in the real book? Well, we find it, first of all, in the key of E flat, because that's just what jazz musicians do. We like playing in F, we like playing in C, B flat, and E flat, all the flat keys. I don't know why that is. I mean, growing up playing that music, I naturally find flats to be way, way easier to deal with than sharps. Is that something you guys have noticed as well? So, Like Someone in Love. This is where we have a really interesting change. The original Jimmy Van Heusen version is very simply just a 2-5-1. 2, and in fact we have really great voice leading da, da, to get us from the 7th of the minor 2 chord to the 3rd of the 7th chord. That's classic voice leading. Resolving to the 1. So what we get in the real book is this version that goes and instead of going to the 1, we have the 3, which is, you know, kind of the same thing, but we get there via this 2-5. That is some pretty significant changes from the original harmony. And this is what's interesting about the real book, right? Because is that wrong? Yes, technically, right? It's not what was originally written. It's not how the tune originally goes. But does it sound better. I like it better. I think it's a more interesting change. It adds more color to the tune, and it's a beautiful transition to get back to that sort of one chord area. So while it's wrong technically, and maybe it's important for us as musicians to know that because it's important to know how tunes were originally written, it is something that's just generally accepted that everybody tends to use, and it's a great set of changes that I probably prefer to the original. But it doesn't change the fact that it's not technically correct. Now, how could something like this happen in such a book? Well, that's a very interesting story. So in the early to mid 70s, there was a group of Berklee students that were frustrated by the inaccuracies and the irrelevance of many of the fake books that existed at that time. The stuff that was available to musicians, especially jazz musicians, at that particular time was just not very helpful, and most of it was maybe even more wrong than what they ended up creating. But what they did end up creating was just a giant pile of all the tunes that they thought should go into one overall fake book to be used by jazz musicians that could set the standard for what should be in a jazz fake book. And they ultimately called it the real book, and that is what we ended up with. Now, here's the thing. They were a few college kids. They didn't exactly have any ability to go secure copyright or figure out royalties or anything like that. So they just kind of did it. But it was so good and it was so necessary. All the musicians everywhere were just like, yeah, we want this. So how are we gonna do this deal? Let's do some cash deals in the back room of the music store. These things were trading like drugs because they were illegal, because they had no copyright. They were paying no royalties to the original composers. And this went on from 1975, when the first version of the book dropped, all the way until 2004. The first 30 years of its existence, it was flat out illegal. You could not buy a real book at any legitimate place of business in any legitimate way. And naturally, when you leave it up to a bunch of college kids, they did a really great job, but there were a lot of things that were left out. There were a lot of mistakes that were made. Well, that was something that in 2004, Hal Leonard came to the rescue to say, hey, you know what? Everybody uses this. We all have it. We all know it exists. There's nothing about its illegality that's going to stop people from using and getting a hold of it. So what they did is they said, well, why don't we actually go to all of the copyright holders of the songs that showed up in the original real book? Let's secure the rights to actually use these legitimately and pay royalties to the original composers. That's exactly what they did. And almost all of the songs that were in the original real book ended up in the 6th edition, which was the first legitimate legal edition of the real book in 2004. And of course, all of the composers and the people who held the copyrights were thrilled to have the opportunity to actually get some royalties for this thing that had been being used for 30 years, and they knew it, but they couldn't really do anything about it. So everybody was pretty much on board for Hal Leonard creating this version of the real book that would become legitimate and able to be sold in every music store you walk into. And in the process of getting all the rights to these original songs that showed up in earlier editions of the real book, they certainly made a lot of corrections, but a lot of the things, for example, like Someone in Love, slipped under the radar. Maybe that was on purpose. Maybe it was because, well, by that point, people had just kind of adopted, especially jazz musicians, had just adopted this new way of playing this song. Let's look at another example. Without hearing Blue Train, let's just look at how this is written in the book. And let's play it, how it's written in the book, and see if it makes any sense at all. At a speed you might normally hear the tune. I can't even play it. Let's listen to the actual recording of Blue Train. Okay, the real book is completely and utterly wrong. It's not even close, right? Even if we so in the real book we have this thing that's written. What am I even looking at? I'm getting more confused the more I think about what's written in the real book. So they've got it in C. The actual tune is in E flat. Okay, so even if we translated the chord changes, so they're using backdoor 2/5. they're using backdoor 2/5s to get to these chords. So even if we did it in E flat, it would be a 2/5, backdoor 2/5 to E flat, and they have it as minor. That's not what we hear in the recording at all. If you listen to the original recording of Blue Train, it's just the blues. Where all this extra 2/5 stuff came from. Even the melody is not even right. I fell into this trap when I was first starting out. You have a tendency to just want to play with other people and you just want to play the tune, and you get this real book and you get this fake book and you're like, oh, well, if somebody calls the tune that's in here, I got it, I can play it, it's good. Wrong! As we've clearly illustrated here a couple of times so far, things in the real book are just sometimes not right. So if you get up on stage and you play with other people who all maybe know how the tune is supposed to go, and you're just using the real book and consulting the real book for all your harmony and all the things, all the melodies and the rhythms and all that stuff, people are probably gonna know. And this is the catch with the real book, right? Because it can be really useful to have something to consult to remind yourself of the harmony. And in a lot of cases, I would say most cases, things are pretty much right. It would be okay to use that as a reference point for playing with other people. However, this totally illustrates the importance of listening to versions of the songs that you are trying to learn. Not only will you understand them much more thoroughly, you'll understand things like little hits and stuff that everybody always does, rhythmic motifs or harmonic motifs. Things that come to mind are like the intro to All the Things You Are. I don't know if that really shows up in many versions of a chart for that song, but it's something that everybody just knows. It's important to consult these original sources for things so that you understand the context and that you understand how things originally were supposed to sound, because sometimes it can be like, oh, that's what they mean by this particular change that feels weird. This thing written in the real book that I play, and I kind of never really understood what it's supposed to be getting at. A lot of those questions and a lot of those important details that you need to know are given to you by the original recordings, and they're not given to you by the real book. Let's consult one more example. If we look at the real book for the tune But Not For Me, you will find start out with a secondary dominant 2-5-1. But that's not how the song goes. Let's listen to Ella once more.
They're writing songs of love, but not for me.
How beautiful is that, right? And so she's in the key of A flat, right? We have a nice fat 1 chord. I mean, it doesn't get any more jazz than that. 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. That's all of the jazz. That's it. It's beautiful.
They're writing songs of love, but not for me.
Then, check this out.
Stars above.
Woo! Oh, wow. Woo, inner voice movement, right? But check that out, right? There is our secondary dominant 2 chord, right? Our dominant 2. Okay, the one that the real book says we start the tune on, that's not what we start the tune on. That's only the second time, right? The first time, it's just a regular. That's it. Maybe add the 6 in there. Now, we use that 2 chord, right? But how beautiful is that though, you know? And without consulting the original versions of these tunes, you wouldn't know. You would just play the stuff that's in the real book, and you know what? Everybody would probably be like, yeah, you got the tune down, you know it. but you don't know it. The real book is great for so many things, and in many cases, you're not necessarily always gonna run into issues like this, but why take that chance, right? Check out the original recordings of these tunes. Of course, from there, we do make changes in jazz. We apply harmony in different ways, and we say, maybe instead of just going to that 6 before we turn around, we can add some stuff in there, right? We can go, just add a couple chords in front of that 6. Story, and it's super cool that we now have this legal version of something that contains so many great tunes that we can use as references. The real book's great, you can use it, you can consult it, it's often perfectly accurate, but it's way more accurate to learn things from recordings and learn all of the little details that will help you play in a setting with other musicians and sound like you know exactly what you're doing. And if you want to know exactly what you're doing, especially when it comes to harmony, don't forget we have now released our brand new Harmony 101 course. There's a link down in the description below, and that can help you understand a lot of the things that we've been talking about in this video when it comes to numbers and 2-5-1s and all that kind of stuff. Not only that, but you will learn how to harmonize any note in any chord for any particular application. Whether you want to write songs for voices or multiple horns or multiple instruments, whatever you want to do, this is a great resource. And I'm so excited about this course because it's taught by one of the people who taught me everything I know, my professor when I was in school, and he's now the director of jazz studies at my alma mater, Purchase College, and that is David De Jesus. He's an incredible musician and an incredible teacher, and he did a fantastic job on this course, and we're so happy to put it out for you. You're gonna learn a ton. Just click the link in the description. It's a great way to support the channel. It helps us continue doing what we love, which is bringing content to you guys. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for your support, and thank you for taking the time to watch this video. Let me know in the comments below what other things in the real book you have found that are incorrect. And don't forget, brand new episode of the podcast, Odd Time, is out. There's a link down in the description to all of your favorite podcast platforms. But if you want to help us out and subscribe to the YouTube channel, there should be a card right around here for that. That would really, really help us out, and I really appreciate it. So thank you once again, and thanks for taking the time to watch this video. We will see you in the next one.
Boy, this local organic food craze is getting out of hand. I went to Safeway this morning to get some wild berry Pop-Tarts, and there were none on the shelf. When I asked the manager where they were, he said they're not in season.
That's pretty good, dude.